So here it is. Welcome to the Cereal Bowl.
The Cereal Bowl.
And we play music.
Right, yeah, we're working on that. So where should we start? So Fantômas.
Yeah, the O is like a oo because there's like a little arrow over the O, so it's like Fantômas. It's a mix of phantom, which is ghost, and as, which is ace. Like he's an ace thief.
Oh,
he's an ace ghost.
Yeah.
That's a great name.
Yeah,
I didn't know the etymology of it, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a portmanteau. That's another French word for you.
Yeah, you've been to France, yeah?
Yes, I did a summer in the Riviera doing an international school to learn some French, and I did some a journalism course through my college.
Awesome.
We should go to you for all of the pronunciation. We've been having a really hard time this whole podcast.
I did take 3 semesters of French, but I still mess it up most of the time.
As good as I am. I actually, when I was watching the first episode, I attempted to watch it without subtitles because I was used to things like Nosferatu and Metropolis that are kind of like sparing with the title cards, but Fantômas was like, you had to read a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Fantômas. Like there was no like, oh, well, I could, I know enough French. I could pick up enough. At like by the time you got to the 3rd letter and you had to read an entire letter, I was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I really appreciate it when movies around this time have a lot of intertitles because the visual storytelling is sometimes so clumsy that without tons of intertitles, it's sometimes hard to tell what's fundamentally even happening. So I appreciate them.
I do like to rag on some films occasionally for their over-reliance on subtitles. Like whole scenes will happen just in intertitles.
Yeah, you're almost reading a book.
I do not mind at all because sometimes I just like glaze over otherwise.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, there's a difference between active media and passive media, and I think it's interesting. I guess you guys will see it happen over your many episodes. Film going from active to passive, where you can have a movie on in the background now, or once talkies happen, whereas you have to put in a lot of work to experience a silent movie.
Absolutely, yeah. They demand a lot more of you. How what's your history with silent movies? Did you feel like this was demanding you to be a lot more active when you saw it?
Well, my history is that I watched some in college because I would take film courses, but from working at our alma mater, the Alamo Draft House, I saw a lot of movies when they would do like the live orchestra and stuff like that. So that's how I saw Nosferatu and Metropolis.
Yeah.
This time. And yeah, I think that this one didn't feel like homework, potentially because there was a lot to read. I agree with you that sometimes I could glaze over if it's if there's not enough to read for a while and it's overly relying on their acting.
Yeah, well, be glad you didn't watch some of the movies this week. So this is Louis Fouillade working for Gaumont, and he previously made. I feel like the closest thing that he made to this before was The Trust or Battles for Money.
Yeah,
which
was my favorite of whatever year that came out.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, that movie was awesome. And honestly, his experience in the field shows off in this because I feel like Fantômas is a very well put together, just visually, narratively. A lot of these movies waste a lot of time, and I feel like Fantômas is very efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fantômas, I think, is one of my favorite things that we've watched on this whole podcast.
Yeah.
It was good. It slapped.
I mean, I think it works very well from like a contemporary perspective. Like it feels very much faster paced, and just like the sensibilities of it, I think, feel a bit more modern than a lot of the other things that we've been watching.
Yeah.
Should we describe what Fantômas is and what it's about?
Definitely. Do you want to take that?
Sure. So Fantômas is a film serial. So it is a series of films. Uh, Sort of. Yeah, I think probably the closest modern equivalent would be a TV show, but it was shown theatrically.
Television
I'm not sure
event
what.
yet.
Yeah, small detail. Um,
So
do
yeah.
either of you know how frequently they come out?
Oh, I didn't check specifically, but I know that like 3 of them came out this year, and the last 2 came out next year. So we're
Yeah.
only going to be talking about the first 3 here. I'm not sure about the how quickly they came out though.
I believe it was, if not monthly, then like bi-monthly. They weren't that frequent.
It wasn't weekly.
No, it wasn't Saturday nights. Let's go to the theater and watch Fantômas.
Wikipedia does not say.
I was,
Well,
I was thinking about how time consuming, like you went to the theater for like 6 hours, like for some of these.
Yeah. This is something that I feel like takes a lot more like historical digging than we have been able to do, but I've been very curious about just the experience of going to the theater at this time. We have all of these movies that are kind of a little divorced from their theatrical experience, and it seems like you would get like kind of a mix of different things up until this point. You get a bevy of shorts all kind of stitched together, and maybe like a feature as well.
And
But yeah, but yeah, go on, Glenn.
well, the Fantômas, to say it correctly, is I guess sort of a crime thriller about the title character, who is a sort of mysterious gentleman thief, master of disguise type. But at least right when it started, I was like, oh, okay, he's like a gentleman thief. He's like stealing stuff. And then very quickly I realized that he's not really an anti-hero. He's much more of a villain. Fantômas is a bad dude.
Yeah,
He murders people. He frames people. He like cuts off people's hands.
With that snake or whatever.
Yeah, he'll kill you with a snake. But
he kills people in a lot of different interesting ways in these 3 episodes.
But he's got all these different disguises, all these different personas, all these different sort of wacky like escape techniques that he uses. He's a great character.
Yeah.
And through these first 3 episodes, we kind of follow a few different characters. I think the first episode focuses the most on Fantômas himself, whereas the second episode, Fantômas versus Juve, focuses more on Inspector Juve, who is sort of Fantômas's nemesis in the police department. He's trying to catch him.
He's named after Javert too, as a sort of hat tip.
Wow. Okay.
And then the third episode, the murderous corpse, focuses more on Fandor, who is a journalist who is also trying to catch Fantômas.
He was sort of like Juve's Robin or Dr. Watson.
Yeah.
Second one.
And they have sort of a parts of it have almost a sort of like buddy cop feel, which I don't know if we've watched stuff before that you could say this about, but this might be the first buddy cop movie. I don't know.
Yeah, I could buy it.
Top journalist team up.
Yeah, I was reminded of a lot of kind of contemporary genre things. Like there's parts of it that feel kind of like a procedural. There's parts of it that are very funny. There are parts that are kind of horrifying.
Yeah, Fantômas is like a scary dude at points.
Oh yeah.
Like he's very intimidating.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Silence of the Lambs a lot. Because you have,
especially in the third one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because Fantômas skins a person's hands.
and uses his fingerprints.
Yeah, uses them as gloves. That was very Buffalo Bill. But even just like the brilliant criminal that like is always one step ahead of the police is very like a huge genre in film and television. Like I am surprised that it exists this far in the past of like he's such a magnificent brilliant person and we can't stop him, and there's like a love-hate relationship that it's kind of like Batman and Joker, where like when you have two people who are really passionate about one another, there's like a weird like connection between the two characters. Like
Right.
all Juve does is think about Fantômas,
Yeah. I think another guess comparison you could make is Professor Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes stories is another sort of like criminal mastermind archetype. And yeah, it does this. This is based on a series of French novels from around the same time. Definitely not after. But
The novelizations, yeah.
it does feel kind of comic booky. Like I can definitely see the what's the right word? The inspiration, I guess, or the ways that like comics in particular have sort of taken maybe not from this series specifically, but from this kind of like crime thriller
genre fiction in general. I mean,
yeah.
Soon after this, you get pulp stories, which are the predecessor to comic books. And comic books are known for being a bit of a genre mishmash, where you will have crime thrillers and you'll also have sci-fi and horror. So they do take from stuff like this, and I totally got a comic booky vibe from this serial.
Yeah, and probably an even more pulpy vibe. Like,
yeah,
it feels very, very pulpy.
Yeah, especially in like how the thing I was almost most shocked by with this is how amoral it is. How like kind of disturbingly amoral it is. Like I was reading into Louis Fouillade a bit, and he's kind of like apparently he's kind of like a conservative dude, but he's making these like lurid, like creepy amoral serials here. I mean, we've seen a lot of like varying different types of things from Fouillade. So it's not like his conservative personal life has bled into his work in the way that like D.W. Griffith has. But still, these movies are, yeah, a comparison that I initially thought to make was with Arsène Lupin, right? They were both written around the same time. Lupin predates Fantômas by a couple years. But
that's
Lupin,
kind of what I expected this to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not at all.
No.
Even though my only I was not only was I expecting him to be friendly and more affable and all that kind of thing. I don't even know the real Lupin. I just know the anime one, who's probably even from the Miyazaki movie that I've seen, who's even more silly.
Yeah, that is actually my only actual like reference point for Lupin is Lupin the Third, the anime.
I watched the Netflix show, a French Omar Sy led reboot that came out this year.
Yeah, I heard that was great.
Yeah, it's fun, and he's definitely a moral character in a way that like Fantômas is not at all.
One thing that I think stuck out about, I guess, like the structure of these is they do feel structurally very much like TV episodes. I think each one is kind of broken down into smaller chapters or sections, and I think each one is based on a separate novel. But I mean, the first episode ends with Inspector Juve sort of declaring that he's going to try to catch him, and Fantômas kind of gloating or showing off.
Mm-hmm.
And then that ends with, it's like, all right, this rivalry has been established, and I was like, oh man, I gotta watch the next episode.
You were hooked. You were coming back to the cinema a month or 2 months later with that fresh in your brain, thinking, I got to see what happens to good old Inspector Juve.
Yeah. there's so much great like for how sort of contemporary we're saying this feels. It is full of great old timey stuff. Also, there's a police report at the beginning of the second episode that Inspector Juve is sort of writing his thought process, I guess, is sort of like, is this person really dead? Are they faking their death? And then it just says mystery, which I wish that was in all police reports. Just whenever they don't know something, they just write mystery.
I noticed the nunnery stuff was very old fashioned, where it was like anytime a woman was slightly exasperated or overwhelmed, it was like, get her to a convent. Like that's the only place that knows how to take care of her. Like it was like their go-to. And then I was sitting there thinking like, wow, there's no institution like that now. That's like a church like thing where you just sort of like leave babies and destitute women. Like you just like go up there and you're like, you're a member of society, here, take our problem. Like I'm like, this is such lost to time.
I wonder if that actually happened as much as it seems like it does based on watching silent films from this era, because it happens so much in silent films. I don't think
And
it actually
Hamlet.
happened. Yeah, it's like pretty much any like straight drama from Europe at the very least is just there's always a convent involved.
Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, it's in the title.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the big twist at the end of episode 2 is that it appears that Juve is dead.
Yeah.
And then episode 3 is like his little buddy's like solo adventure, like without his safety net of his big brother figure.
Yeah. We can get into this because this episode 3 was my favorite one, and a lot of it had to do with that plot point specifically. So yeah, at the end of episode 2, Fantômas blows up a house that he's been hiding in with Juve inside, and then we find out in the sort of prologue of episode 3 that Inspector Juve has been declared dead. And it's like, oh shit, I thought he was going to be kind of one of the main characters, but all right, I guess not. But almost right away very quickly we're introduced to this character. I did not write his name down.
Chronojour.
Oui. Who's working for a fence as you know, sort of in Fantômas' crime network.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sort of got like a beard and like soot on his face, and I think we're told that he is like just dumber than a bag of hammers.
I thought he had impetigo when I first started watching it, because the way that the makeuping was, he had like white splotches sometimes. I was like, oh, who's this person? I was fooled. Am I dumb? Did you guys think that was Juve right away?
I had a suspicion. I thought he was someone because I didn't recognize the actor. I wasn't like, oh, that's him.
Well, here's the thing. In the intro credits, they say that in the intro credits for every episode, they say, you know, René Navarre, who's playing Fantômas, and they also list all of the names of the other characters that he plays for his various disguises and alter egos. And in the opening credits for episode 3, they had the guy who plays Juve as Juve and this guy.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I didn't know for sure, but I had a sneaking suspicion. And then there's all these little clues that they're giving you throughout the whole episode. We're like following this other character that we don't know, and it's like, oh, the criminals use him because he's super dumb and he won't like give away any of their secrets. But then we see him when he's alone, and he's like looking through binoculars, and he's clearly pretty crafty. And then while Fandor is in the sewers trying to investigate, he almost gets killed by one of Fantômas' underlings, who's who works at the prison. But Caranjour saves him, and so it's like, all right, there's something going on here. But they wait until the very end of the episode, to the point where I was kind of convinced towards the end. I was like, oh, I guess maybe Juve is dead. Maybe this is just some other guy. And then Juve in disguise meets Fandor and asks him for a light for a cigarette. And then as he's leaving, he says, "Thanks, Fandor." And Fandor's like, "What? How does he know my name?" And he chases after him. And then he goes back. Juve goes back to his office, which we haven't seen since like the beginning of episode 2. And just like that establishing shot of the office, I was like, "Oh shit, it's him!" Oh, it's so good. And then they reconnect, and they're like, "All right, now we can go take down Fantômas together." Now that he's been working undercover in his crime network. Oh, so good.
Yeah, these movies are really they're really gripping. The storytelling is fantastic. And like the twists and turns really sell themselves. I like to dip into some formal stuff for a second. These movies are quite good when it comes to mystery type cinematography of kind of establishing important items and important set pieces before they become relevant.
Yeah.
One thing that I was really impressed by was in the very beginning of the first episode, where it becomes very important the time that it takes this elevator to get from the top floor to the bottom floor. Because within the elevator, Fantômas is changing his costume and finding a way to escape and knocking a guy out and everything. But at the beginning, you see this you see the elevator going up to from the ground floor to the first floor, and then the second floor, and then the third floor. You're thinking like, why is it taking this long? You know, but it's like establishing that sense of space, so it you really know exactly how much of a ticking clock that Fantômas has to knock this guy out and steal his costume when he's coming back down that elevator. A lot of little stuff like that in these movies that I thought was really, really good.
Yeah, that's like fundamental like thriller filmmaking right there, like establishing space and time so that you know like when the chips are down, when stuff's going on, you understand what the stakes are and sort of all that stuff.
Have you guys been like consistently surprised by things that seem more like they shouldn't be as modern as they should from watching some of these things? Like, wow, I didn't realize this person wrote romance really well, or this person wrote suspense really well. Like, just you underestimated the past.
For sure, I think there's a lot of stuff that I'm consistently very surprised at how early some stuff is showing up, whether it be like sound film or color film or like different techniques and things. And I'm like, I didn't think this showed up for like 20 more years. Yeah, it's been very surprising.
Fantômas eventually goes on to inspire an Italian comic strip called Diabolic or Diabolique. I don't know how to pronounce it because it has a K in it, and Italian does not normally have Ks in their names. And Diabolic is like wears an all black cat suit and has a assistant named Eva, and that's also enormously popular in Europe. It's like just a straight up ripoff that has hit as many European readers as Fantômas has. And even Donald Duck in some Disney comics uses the name Peppernick or something like that. That's reference to Diabolique and Fantômas. Like it's reverberated, especially in comic books. It's like gone through decades as various iterations.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, Fantômas is, I think the easiest way to describe him is a supervillain. He has like different disguises. He has sort of a costume that he wears of like all black clothing with a hood and like tight pants.
Yeah, it was like Dread Pirate Roberts from Princess Bride with like an executioner mask.
Yeah. There's so many. I gotta bring up just a couple of the great escapes that he makes. There's one where Juve and Fandor have him by either arm, and they're sort of taking him down the street to arrest him. And then you find out that he had fake arms in his coat. And so he just ducks and runs away because they were holding fake, like, breakaway arms. And then there's an intertitle that just is 10 minutes later, and we see Fantômas is back at a different bar, like, drinking and partying.
No, he goes back to the same bar, I think.
Is it the same bar?
No, like, yeah.
Even better.
He's hanging out
what
with
a
some
legend.
ladies. Yeah, he's hanging out with some ladies. That he's told that there are some people waiting for him outside. So he's like, "Excuse me, ladies, I'm going to go put on my coat and go outside." He puts on a coat with fake arms. He escapes, and then Juve and Fandor go, we lost him. And then Fantômas sneaks back into the party and starts hanging out with the ladies again.
And then at the end of the third episode, when it's like, all right, Fandor and Juve are finally reunited, they're going to go catch him. And they have him like up against a wall, cornered. And the wall just opens and he goes through and it closes again. Did he plan for that exact situation? You know, like he gets himself cornered in where he knows the breakaway wall is going to be.
Did you like the reversal that they gave him calling cards?
I didn't even pick up on that until just now, but that is amazing.
He's like, Inspector Juve, Fandor, what? Juve is alive. And then they're like, joke's on. You're the one with the calling cards now. We're in the game too.
So good.
Surprisingly good.
Yeah. I don't know. What else can we say about this other than how good it is? I think the only other thing that I need to say is that Fantômas was truly the Gene Parmesan of his time.
Yeah.
That's how we should end. Just yeah, that is true.
We're here to discuss the last two episodes of Louis Feuillard's Fantômas. I keep having to correct myself every time I say it.
Yeah, the O with the little arrow over it's like a ooh.
Yeah.
The Ace Phantom.
What did you all think of these two ultimate and penultimate Fantômas episodes?
Still pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
Not really a super not really a closed and shut conclusion, I should say.
No, yeah. Left open-ended, certainly.
Yeah.
I read on French Wikipedia, I translated it, and I hit the translate button, and they were saying that a lot of audiences at the time, now this is Wikipedia, so I guess anybody can edit it, and whatever, but they said that people knew the books well enough that it was kind of just like, let's just see how they adapt it. Like, nobody was really sitting there thinking like, oh, how's Fantômas going to get out of this one? It's kind of like seeing a comic book adaptation today a little bit.
There's like a lot of stuff that happened in these. A lot of intrigue. Certainly.
As always.
It's a dense show.
Yeah. I mean, like, within the course of an hour or an hour and change, it's a lot of plots, machinations going back and forth. You know, I try and write summaries as I'm watching these things, so I can just remember the bullet points of what happens. But it ends up being so long for every episode of Fantômas.
Yeah. They're movies, even though they're like, you know, technically like half or a third the length of a movie. It's like short movies.
Yeah. No, they pack a lot of plot into each one. I guess starting with episode 4, where we left off. I think episode 3 overall was my favorite episode, but I think episode 4 might be my second favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just has such juicy setup. It's got a costume ball. And it has not one Fantômas, but 3 Fantômases. Fantômasi.
Yeah. This episode's called Fantômas versus Fantômas, but it should have added
Dawn
another
of Justice.
Dawn of Justice.
We'll get to it.
In this one of Fantômas's aliases or disguises is an American private detective named Tom Bob, which is just Chef's kiss, fake American name.
Yeah, really convincing to all the French people.
That's gonna be my alias.
I did love
porn.
thinking about that. Like Louis Fiat is just like, what? It's just like I need an American name. Tom Bob. That's
But
American, right?
he writes it on his business card. He's like, Tom
Yeah.
Bob, American detective.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm Mrs. and he looks at the newspaper. Police Doubtfire. I'm Mrs. Doubtfire.
There's some really cool, like, horrific imagery in this one too, including like a body that is stashed inside of a wall, like it within a wall, and then they come, they start digging through the wall, and then blood starts kind of pouring out of the walls. That's rad.
It's very, this whole Fantômas just as a whole is very macabre,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
would say, in a fun
Question:
way.
do you guys know? Do like just Europe get like film censorship the way the U.S. does?
Are you talking about like in the way of the code, like the Hays Code?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. I guess we'll find out. I know that like we have heard stuff about local country level censorship boards, like or at least things being censored in certain European countries. But I don't know about something as all encompassing as the American code.
It seems like it's more of a kind of case by case basis where sometimes a film will get imported to a different country and it'll get some scenes cut out.
Yeah, that still happens today, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there wasn't much of a European Union to broadly decide European affairs at this point. In fact, the European continent was very much not in union at this time.
Yeah, isn't it so
Quite
weird
the opposite.
to think that Fantômas started in like the last gasps of Imperial Europe, and then it like is at the end of it? Like, it's so weird to think in the grand scale of history.
Yeah, when you watch a lot of these things and you see them in HD or you see like real life documentary type footage, it's odd to think about all of the things that this was earlier than. It was earlier than the Great Depression. It was earlier than World War II and the Holocaust and everything. Not so much baggage on Charlie Chaplin's little mustache at this point.
Yeah, it was just like a chic, cool mustache at the time.
Yeah. It's kind of cool to see, especially with the European films too, just like see kind of a glimpse of that time period too.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think the entire time I'm watching Fantômas. I'm just like looking at the houses and looking at the people just like existing, and I'm like, I can't even conceptualize a world where like the Holocaust hasn't happened, or like it just seems so like removed, like in a potentially like freeing way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
There
was no bad stuff in world history.
Except for Fantômas.
Yeah, he's the first villain.
So yeah, one of the things that happens here is that it's more of Fantômas manipulating Lady Beltham. I feel so bad for her when I watch this.
I know.
She's really like just being constantly manipulated and abused by Fantômas, and she really just like can't get out of it no matter how hard she tries. But basically like she has moved on to be like a rich countess or something like that. Married into a new fortune, and then like she's living her happy life, and then Fantômas shows up and says, "Hey, throw a ball where people will donate to donate resources to help catch Fantômas, and then I will steal that money."
Yeah.
And it's a costume ball, and a couple people come dressed as Fantômas, which is, I guess,
genius.
Tasteful.
Yeah. Well, Fandor, the heroic journalist, decides to come dressed up as Fantômas as a trick, and then a police detective also shows up as Fantômas, and so there's a scene of Lady Beltham sort of at the door of the ball welcoming guests, and one Fantômas shows up, and then a second Fantômas shows up, and then a third Fantômas shows up, and even you can kind of see like people at the party are like, "Whoa, hold on, like what's going on?"
But I thought it was interesting how and the intertitles make note of this, of how she can kind of like sense which is the real one. So she you can see that she feels a little uneasy about fake Fantômas being there, but then when the real one shows up, she's like, ugh, oh.
Yeah.
Do you think they've been intimate?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like that's pretty heavily implied.
It's shown, like just pure hardcore porn in the middle of the serial.
I think you got a different file tonight.
Yeah, the unrated director's cut.
Did you guys look up all these actors? Because I get curious, like how long people lived and like what the like. There's not a lot of info on any of these people.
I looked up the guy who plays Fantômas.
He lived a long life. He died in his 90s, I think.
Yeah, which surprised me.
Fandor died young. Fandor was like in 50 something when he died.
Mm.
And then Juve was in the 70s. It was like they were all died like 20 years apart from one another.
I mean, speaking of Juve, by the way, he spends the beginning, like the first half of this episode, in prison. Basically, there are just rumors. There are rumors that Fantômas isn't real and that it's actually Juve. And just on that suspicion, on those rumors that are printed in the newspaper, they're like, all right, off to prison with you, Juve.
Yeah.
And
now, if this was a show today, that'd be a whole season exploring the psychology of Juve and seeing if Fantômas is like actually a construct in his head or something.
Yeah.
They hint at the idea, certainly.
It's also funny that exact plot point has been in like more recent like Sherlock Holmes adaptations and the Hannibal show, and like that whole thing of like the detective, like people think that the villain is all in the detective's head,
right?
Is very much a like recurring thing in these types of stories.
And yeah, it's interesting because, you know, Fantômas is just mega savvy in all of these works.
Yeah.
And so Fantômas, when he's discovered partially at the party, he gets a cut on his arm and he gets it treated by somebody at the party. He escapes, and then he has what's his name? The prison guard, Nibe, or whatever, however you pronounce that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that is.
He has Nibe come in and come into Juve's cell and cut Juve on the arm where Fantômas was cut, so that there would be more corroborating evidence that the Fantômas is Juve. But luckily, the cops kind of show up in Juve's cell while he is still drugged by Nibe, and they realize that he's drugged, and that they say, okay, something hinky's going on here.
Yeah.
And then they eventually
what all
catch...
French police say? Something hinky's going on.
Something hinky is going on.
Maybe.
Juve is in prison a lot in the fifth one too.
Juve is then cleared of having made up Fantômas, but is then almost immediately kidnapped.
Yeah, Juve doesn't have a good time in a lot of these later episodes.
No, yeah.
He's kind of sidetracked a bit for a lot more of Fandor.
Yeah.
Yeah, they go for the young hot one. The young spry one who dies first.
All these new film serials.
Always looking for the hot new actor. Always putting all the character actors of a certain age out to pasture.
I will note, though, that when they wake Juve up in prison, it's more handy smelling salts that people happen to have on them at all times.
They always carry them around because there's a lot of chloroformine happening in the olden times, in old France.
Yeah, it's just how people go to sleep sometimes.
And this one also ends with another false capture of Fantômas.
As is the MO of the show, yeah.
And
not my favorite one, but a pretty good one.
And once again, they're grabbing him by his arms, and I'm like, "Didn't you learn last time, you guys? Like,
he's got those fake arms,
but
he doesn't use it
in
this
the fifth
time."
one too.
What do they do in the fifth one?
They also grab him by his arms again when they.
Oh yeah, that's
yeah.
just their go-to move.
Invent handcuffs. I mean, come on. Yeah, and in this one, the way that Fantômas gets out is that he leads them along a path as they're walking him from his mansion out to the police station. He leads them along a path that has two conveniently placed holes alongside that they slip and fall into, and he loses them.
There's a scene like right before that, like right before they catch him in this one. However briefly, where Fantômas is stealing the money that was gathered at the costume ball from Lady Beltham's house, and this scene, I don't know, it put Fantômas in such a different perspective for me, because this entire time he's like got all these disguises and tricks and escapes, and this is just a scene of him like going through a drawer at his ex-girlfriend's house and stealing her money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, this guy is such a what a dick. It's just like they're like no grand, thievery happening. Like he's just taking money from a drawer.
He's a scoundrel. He's just a bad dude.
He's a user and an abuser.
And yeah, it's funny how like that, the like mundanity of it almost made it seem worse.
Yeah. He's not this like brilliant genius Hannibal Lecter type like he came off in the first couple episodes. He's just kind of like a dick.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me too of like the end of Die Hard, when sort of everything else stripped away from Hans Gruber, all of his plans. He's just like, no, like I'm just here for money. Like he kind of reveals his sort of neediness, I guess, by the end of the movie, and it kind of reminded me of that.
It's a good comparison. I've always thought of Hans Gruber as the Fantômas of the 80s.
Well, I guess that brings us to episode 5, The False Magistrate.
The False A lot of paperwork in this episode.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, he's having to pretend to be a law clerk of some type.
Yeah, so. Judge, they call him, but I don't know if that's just like an imprecise translation.
Yeah.
He ends up having to sign a lot of paperwork, definitely.
He's like a notary, like a notary public.
his grand evil plan to impersonate a notary.
Yeah, that's the finale of the season, of the series finale. That's the big con to go out on is I'm a notary public.
There's sort of a surprise early in this episode that we find out that Fantômas has actually been caught, but in Belgium.
Yeah, where they're a bunch of pansies who have no strict capital punishment like France.
Yeah, and so Juve is upset that Belgium is just going to imprison Fantômas and not execute him.
Yeah, because he knows how cunning Fantômas is, so he's just going to break out anyway. Like, you can't...
So his grand old plan is to break Fantômas out of prison, replace him in prison,
break the law,
and then have him followed back to France and then caught in France so that he can be put to death.
Amazing plan, Juve.
Yeah.
So
no
good.
possible ways that can go wrong, right?
However,
Fantômas pretty much immediately loses his tail after escaping from prison, and then immediately after that murders a judge.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd think there wouldn't be consequences to letting this murderer out on the loose.
There is, real quick, I do want to mention the lighting in Fantômas' cell when they show him in prison is probably the best in the series. Some of the best lighting I think we've seen in anything this far, because it's light coming through the bars of the cell and projecting the shadow of the bars on the wall. It's just great.
That's that kind of noir-y lighting, I suppose.
Yeah.
So when Fantômas kills this judge, he realizes what a good position this could put him in, and so he assumes this man's identity.
And all the banalities of his life.
Yeah, including all the paperwork. And the bulk of this episode is him using his power as a judge to try and manipulate all of the situations around Fantômas's realness and Fantômas's arrested status, and to his advantage, and also to pull off all sorts of petty crimes as well.
Fantômas does white collar crime more this episode, because it's like impersonating a clerk and like using paperwork to beat the system.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the setup is for it. He's sort of recruits a couple of kind of low level criminals.
Yeah.
By following them to their hideout in the train yard.
That is another way he's different than other criminal genius characters. Is he always has a posse. Like he rarely does stuff just solo through his sheer brilliance. He's usually like extorting people or coercing people into being his like little army.
Including these people who it seems like they just respect Fantômas so much that they just go along with being his underlings.
Yeah.
Which doesn't work out great for them.
No.
There is maybe my favorite scene. Not my favorite scene in the whole show, but definitely my favorite scene of the episode is the clock tower.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Where one of the criminals has stashed a box of jewels up inside the bell.
Church bell. Yeah.
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 It's not a clock tower, a bell tower. And so they have to go to retrieve it, and the Fantômas holds the ladder as the criminal climbs up the ladder to get to the top of this thing. And there's two shots in this that are really stand out. One is there's like almost like a vertical shot, like a pillar boxed shot of the whole tower, and you see them standing tiny at the bottom and the bells at the top.
It feels like a cross section almost. Like
it does. It also, it's like vertical video.
Yeah.
Which made me think, does this make Fantômas the first Quibi?
Oh no.
I think so.
Way too long to be a Quibi.
Just that scene is a Quibi.
Yeah.
Yeah. It probably is. And then there's a boom shot, which is the camera, instead of tilting up, physically moving up as it follows the guy climbing up the ladder the whole way up, which is used to great effect, just to kind of show like how much ladder this guy is going through. And it's the first time I think we've seen a camera move quite like this one. We've seen similar stuff in some early whatchamacallums, documentaries and actualite films.
Well, there was the camera movement in A Trip to Jupiter, which was kind of like that, and then there was also the Ferdinand Zecca one with the police chase movie that had the camera moving up as they climbed up the side of a house, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
this is still definitely an early usage.
Yeah, a lot of camera movement breakouts this year in terms of it kind of being more of a thing. So yeah, that scene was great.
Well, the conclusion of that scene's great too. I mean, not to just like only dig into the bloody and disgusting, but
no, that's also part of what makes the scene so good.
It makes up for all the paperwork. Yeah. It's like the big set piece that for the series finale, like they blow their budget on.
It is definitely like a very grim set piece for a grim series. So when Fantômas is helping this guy with the ladder get to the thing stashed inside of the bell, he removes the ladder. So his crony, once the crony's thrown the stash down, he removes the ladder, and then the crony is stuck up there holding on to the little, I don't know what you call it, the little like uvula of the bell, you know,
clapper,
the tonsils of the bell.
Yeah, and so he's just there for like a day or something like that, holding on, not able to sleep, not able to rest because he is stuck inside of a bell tower.
Well, he's sort of tied himself to it.
Oh,
so
is he?
He's like tied up there.
And the next day, there's a funeral for another person that Fantômas has killed in the episode, and Fantômas appears at the funeral as the magistrate, and they ring the bell for the funeral, and in the in the intertitles it says, "As the funeral commences, pearls, diamonds, rubies, and blood rain down on the guests."
Yeah.
Oh,
And there's a shot of the bell ringing, and you see like this guy's not quite lifeless body like
yeah,
banging on the sides of the bell as it's being rung.
that was awesome.
We find out through intertitles that he died like the next day
Ugh.
after just yelling "Fantômas, Fantômas." There's a great intertitle too when Fantômas kicks the ladder away, and it just says "swindled."
By the way, that part of a bell is called a clapper.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Makes sense.
The thing that claps.
Hmm.
So overall, what elements of television or the evolution of cinema did you see by watching a serial like this?
I mean, one thing is just a kind of reminder of how old this sort of form of like serialized like filmmaking has been around for. Like, people are very quick to sort of point out how like, oh, like the Marvel movies are like doing a crazy new thing, and it kind of feels like that, but it also like not really.
Yeah,
Um,
they're repurposing an old thing.
yeah, I mean the idea of like stringing separate films together to tell a greater story, or even to have like characters cross over between them is pretty old.
Yeah,
And also it's cool to see it done this well at this
Yeah.
early point too.
Yeah, I think
Like
one thing from
it's got good cliffhangers and such.
Yeah, I think one thing that I noticed in regard to its similarities to television is that it is more serialized than most television had been up until the post HBO, post Lost era.
Yeah.
It carries a lot more over from episode to episode than you would see in TV from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Mhm.
Absolutely right. Yeah, you can. There's more in common with Fantômas with like girls or Insecure than there is with like Bonanza. You know.
Yeah. All things that I would associate with Fantômas anyway.
Yeah, television is way more passive for many decades. It's just like you watch what's on when it's on. You know, VCRs don't record stuff until the 70s and 80s, 90s. So you just like first episode can be watched the same as the last episode. And Fantômas is there's a little bit of that where you potentially could watch the fifth episode and like not have seen the previous ones because they're chasing a guy named Fantômas. You could just figure that out, but you've met the characters already and you like have an interest because of the previous episodes. Like it builds upon itself, but it's not completely alienating because there were people who would just go to the theater and not be able to see the other four parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was sort of the initial like business appeal of a serial, is that it brings people back to the theater over and over again. It's effectively appointment television, but for whenever the next installment comes out.
Right, pre radio, pre television. It's the very first appointment viewing, and I guess eventually they like movies just change that to just doing sequels, right? Like that's how they crack the code. Like serials, just
franchises.
Franchises, yeah.
Yeah.
The Thin Man, Charlie Chan. Those are the ones probably coming up in your docket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of how like serialization changes, and sort of eventually will evolve into TV. I guess in like the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Which also evolves from radio too, right?
Yeah, true.
The Shadow.
lot of the shadow in Fantômas.
They're both pulp properties, and Glenn, that like a lot of pulp stuff, they'll be like the posse, they'll be like a crew. It'll be like your character and then like 12 people working in their network.
The Shadow's agents.
Yeah, Doc Savage has that. They all have that. Fantômas has elements of that where he has like they're less identifiable outside of the women he emotionally abuses, but he doesn't have like a guy who's like, I'm Fantômas's right hand man. I'm gonna do whatever you want, Mr. Fantômas.
I was reading up on sort of where Fantômas went after this. There were 32 original Fantômas novels. 43 if you count. There was kind of a revival by one of the co-authors, which lasted until 1965.
Oh my God, what were they? 1,000 years old?
Probably.
Weren't the bulk? I think the bulk of them were written in just a couple years, right?
Yeah. The original 32 were written in like a very short span of time, and then there were 43 more after that written by one of the co-authors.
Well, when you do one book 1 year, you can talk about all the Fantômas.
We'll get into that. And then there was some plot stuff that I would have loved to have seen Louis Vuitton adapt. Like in the books, Fantômas has a stepdaughter named Helene, who falls in love with Fandor, and eventually teams up with him and Juve against Fantômas.
Wow. Okay.
There was a 20-part serial made in 1920, made in the U.S., but it is unfortunately lost.
Really? But I was gonna say we could have talked about that in 1920.
Yeah, but sadly, there are some I think French Fantômas movies from the 1960s.
Yeah,
which are kind of getting into more of the like 60s spy genre.
I watched a clip from one of them, and it does have that very 60s spy look to it. It looks James Bondy in a way. But also Fantômas has like a blue face.
I was gonna say, does he have like a paper mache face or like a...
Maybe that's what it was.
What?
Yeah,
I think it's like
he's got no face.
I think it's ceramic or something. He has sort of like a ceramic. It's where the Marvel character Phantom X gets some of his look. It's like you just kind of covered and Diabolic, the Italian version. His is black, but he gets kind of like a look in that 60s one. I think that Diabolic sort of replaces Fantômas in some Euro culture after a certain point, because I think there's a Diabolic movie that came out like last year from Italy.
Oh wow! Got to bring Fantômas back.
Yeah,
they brung Lupin back. They brung Diabolic back. There's got to be a Fantômas revival.
We should do Fantômas versus Lupin: Dawn of Justice.
Yes, and they both have to steal something.
Yeah, but Fantômas is like a piece of shit about it and like kills 10 people and like he's just like a mutilated snake in somebody's car. And Lupin is like, no, don't do that. Like offended by his lack of gentleman qualities.
Yeah, that would be great.
And the post-credit scene is Sherlock Holmes comes in. He's like, "Oh, you Frenchman."
I would watch the hell out of that. French Netflix, get on.
Nobody steal that. We're making that.
Well, I guess that about wraps it up for the Cereal Bowl.
And it wraps it up for Marco too, huh?
That's a series wrap on Marco.
Everybody clap. It's a series wrap on Marco.
Yeah. So the Cereal Bowl is intended to be an occasional feature of the podcast because we can't be watching a bunch of serials and effectively entire television series for each episode.
Yeah, we're already watching like 8 movies a week for this show.
Yeah,
right.
But next week it will come back in the form of Louis Feuillard's The Vampires, which is another crime drama. But me and Glenn have a long task ahead of us of watching those like 600 minutes of vampires footage.
I mean, that all came out 1 year?
It was across 2 years, like Fantômas, but it was 10 episodes, and they're longer.
2 years, 2 weeks?
That's what I should have called the podcast, given how slow I am at producing it.
That's the recap podcast of your podcast. Like,
Yeah.
your fans made 2 weeks, 2 years.
Well, thanks for appearing on this episode, Marco. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yes, you can all find me on Twitter and Instagram at Fleetwood Marco, like the British band Fleetwood Mac, but Marco, all one word. And if you want to read anything I've written, you could go on Story Screen Beacon, and you'll just search my name.
Search Marco Rummo on the google.com.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Marco.
Thank you.